Welcome to our business law presentation on contracts for Postmates, presented by Ariel Rancourt, Lauren Peters, and Nicole Wing. First, we'll start with intellectual property. As you know, its aim is to encourage, inspire, and promote further creativity. Of course, if creators and inventors were worried about others stealing their works, they most likely would not continue producing anything. And the world needs their awesome creativity. So intellectual property laws are in place to protect people's creative works. There are 4 fields: trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and patents. For Postmates' intellectual property contract, we chose to create a trademark application. Federal law governs trademarks, specifically the U.S. Trademark Act, also known as the Lanham Act. Registration can take between 10 and 24 months or longer to process. The filing fee is $225 per class of goods or services covered by the mark being filed. It is valid for 10 years, but may be renewed for additional 10-year periods as long as the mark continues to be in use. You can access a trademark application via the United States Patent and Trademark Office's website, listed here. There's a fillable form through the Trademark Electronic Application System. It's a very simple process and generally intuitive form to fill out, which we'll be discussing soon. Federal registration of trademark with the United States Patent and Trademark Office has several advantages. It provides public notice of the registrant's claim of ownership of the mark. It grants a legal presumption of ownership nationwide. It guarantees the exclusive right to use the mark on or in connection with the goods or services set forth in the registration. The United States Patents and Trademarks Office has this short video about intellectual property. Don't worry, we're only watching about 1.5 minutes of it on the trademark part.
Thing we need to do is define what a trademark actually is. A trademark is generally a word, phrase, slogan, symbol, or design, or combination thereof, that identifies the source of your goods and services and distinguishes them from the goods and services of another party. That is, a trademark lets consumers know that the goods or services come only from you and not from someone else. Essentially, think about it this way. A trademark is a brand. It distinguishes your goods and services from those of your competitors. It helps consumers decide what to buy when choosing between similar or related products. Say, for example, that T. Markey brand shoes are known for their quality workmanship at a reasonable price. When presented with similar shoes at comparable prices, consumers may choose T. Markey brand shoes because they know it's a brand they can trust. And that's a trademark in action. The combination of words and a design identifies the source of a pair of shoes and distinguishes them from the shoes of another manufacturer. People often ask if there's a difference between a trademark and a service mark. There is. A trademark identifies the source of goods, like shoes or laptops, and a service mark identifies the source of services, like landscaping or accounting. Although trademarks are legally different from service marks, it's okay to informally refer to a service mark as a trademark. Throughout this video, we'll use the terms trademark and mark to refer to both trademarks and service marks. So, now that we know what a trademark is, how is it?
Next, we're going to look at what the process for filling out the form is. Again, most of it is pretty intuitive, and there are many directions along the way to help clarify and provide information on how to fill out the form. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview to familiarize you with the process. First, here on the USPTO homepage, you'll click File an Application on the left-hand column, and then File a TEAS application, which opens in a new window. This page holds the bulk of preliminary information to help you get started. And this is the bottom half of the page on the previous slide. You'll select which type of TEAS form you're filling out. Of course, they offer the description of each so you can make an informed decision, and then whether or not an attorney is filling it out. Here you'll fill out all of the contact and business information. You can see there are several fields that I've highlighted in red that need to be completed. This page deals with the mark you're trademarking. If your mark has standard characters, you'll proceed with specific steps geared towards that. For Postmates, we're trademarking special characters since it involves pictures. So the form is very specific as to what they need to know about your mark. Any colors that are associated with it, if it's very specific or if it can include any colors, a detailed description of the image and any accompanying words. Again, tons of information to help you know what is expected. The next few pages deal with the goods or services your trademark will represent. So you'll first click Add Goods and Services, and then a new screen will come up to have you search for your category. You can't really see a full list, so you'll have to start with a search term. For Postmates, I typed in delivery and had over 100 items to choose from. You can see on the far left, you just click for each one that your trademark represents. Now, each of the check marks is not necessarily a different class. Remember that each class is a $225 filing fee. You can see in the second column, which has specific class numbers, so the different codes are the different classes. Once you've selected the items, you'll be brought to this screen. You'll be choosing whether the mark has already been in use, and then they'll be asking you about the dates. Or you will choose that you will be using the mark in the future and have a few things to click to finalize on this screen as well. And then once you make your selections, it will add or assign each of the classes that to your mark. You can see it on the right-hand side that it's assigned. You have an option to change your correspondence information, but it is optional. And finally, you are done. You just sign, pay, and then submit.
Hello, my name is Lauren. I'm here today to talk to you about health law. You might have seen me in some of the business law discussion posts, but just another stranger from your class on the internet. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about health law and Postmates. Now, health law is an area of practice that serves to protect consumers and preserve public health. Without legal checks and balances, corporations and individuals could sell products or offer predatory health insurance plans. Health law and the organizations that enforce health codes seek to circumvent illness and provide damages to those who have suffered. Ever heard those commercials? Have you or a loved one had mesothelioma? Yeah, those ones. When you think of health law, do any organizations come to mind? When I began to research health law, what's defined as and what it falls under, just a large umbrella, I immediately thought of HHS, the CDC, FDA, and the USDA. These federal government organizations do play a large role in keeping our food and drugs safe. However, there are health codes and statutes at the state and local levels as well. California has some of the most stringent and protective health codes out of all 50 states. These regulations keep everyday people like you and I from consuming products that can irreparably harm our bodies. Well, except for tobacco, but that's a whole other presentation. This is Harvard Law's definition of health law. Feel free to scan it over while I talk. Health law is a large spectrum that spans from insurance coverage all the way to the regulation of products that can cause disease. In this presentation, I'll be focusing on two facets of health law: the safety of our food supply and the ethical choices that are inherent to large corporations that produce the food we eat. These corporations are looking to reduce costs. A company's bottom line and the health of Americans can be opposite forces, which is why health law exists. The private sector is not free from federal, state, and local regulations. Now, I don't need to be the millionth person to remind you that we live in unprecedented times. You already know that we're in a pandemic, so why you're doing a group project with strangers via Zoom. For this project, I want to explore the legal implications of Postmates food delivery service during COVID-19, as well as their response. Now, a little backstory before we get started. Postmates has a two-pronged approach in dealing with coronavirus right now. The first actually kind of goes more into Nicole's segment on employment law, so I'm not going to touch on it too much, but there is a small fund in place for the fleet drivers, quote unquote, that drive out the food and deliver the food from Postmates. And the second prong there is the contactless delivery. Postmates has the option right now, you can select it, where your driver can just leave your food on your doorstep. No harm, no foul. You don't come into contact with them. They don't come into contact with you. Now for this project, again, bringing in Postmates to the picture, I was really interested at the start of this, when we were assigned this project, at the intersection of COVID-19, food delivery service through Postmates, which is an essential service, and what kind of liability they could have in terms of someone were to come into contact with coronavirus through Postmates. Coming into this project, I had maybe 10 questions, but for brevity, I narrowed it down for you guys to essentially what it would look like, again, if an employee or consumer of Postmates contracted coronavirus through a restaurant worker. Here is a fun, brief fact pattern I wrote regarding a Postmates driver, customer, and a restaurant employee to engage with the content we're discussing today. With the assumption of airtight contact tracing, Ronald McDonald and the Hamburglar have contracted COVID from a restaurant employee at McBurger. Ronald is a young Postmates driver, and the Hamburglar is an elderly man who ordered Postmates to avoid going into a McBurger during the pandemic. I want to explore what legal avenues, if any, Ronald and the Hamburglar can take against Postmates. Now let's check the terms and agreements to see how much trouble Postmates can get into for this one, and what contracts and agreements, if any, that the average Postmates user enters into with this company. And the answer is not much trouble at all. So throughout business law, we've heavily discussed the ways that agreements and contracts may circumvent legal action when parties have agreed to conditions beforehand. This is very efficient in terms of just kind of negating the legal process and making sure that people have standing to bring around actions. If you've used Postmates, believe it or not, you've signed away your right to sue them for contracting coronavirus, as well as a handful of other torts that we've discussed in class, such as loss of data and reputation. As you can see here, the only way that Postmates would be liable for $1,000 in damages is if the Hamburglar had spent more than that in the past 3 months ordering in food. Most people can't say that they spend that much money on a delivery service. However, from the fact pattern, this guy is eating 20 hamburgers a meal, so it's very possible. But in all seriousness, the Hamburglar has no right to any further damages against Postmates, and note that California is not free from the liability clause. Now we're going on to Postmates Terms and Agreements Section 13, limiting liability. There is no vicarious liability for Postmates if the Hamburglar files a complaint against Ronald McDonald. Ronald's negligent conduct that directly put the Hamburglar at risk is no concern to Postmates. They would not even be a party to that action. You can't get any more candid than this. The last line there, use this platform at your own risk. Now, for my documents, I drafted an answer, affirmative defenses, prayer for relief if it's kind of a response from Postmates if the Hamburglar were to file an action against them, just what their affirmative defenses would look like. And I had 4 different defenses here. It was very interesting for me to learn how to draft these. The first was breach of contract, just because in that agreement, Hamilton B. Ergler, the Hamburglar, said that he cannot sue Postmates. The second one is lack of standing, very similar logic there, just given the terms of agreement. The third is causation. That was very interesting to write. I actually work for a corporate litigation firm. I've never written affirmative defenses about causation, but essentially in that section, I argued that it's very difficult to prove that the Hamburglar definitively got coronavirus from the exchange, especially if it was contactless. And my last affirmative defense was unjust enrichment, or essentially that the Hamburglar might be bringing about this action against Postmates and kind of a get-rich-quick scheme rather than because of due cause. In the last section, I wrote a prayer for relief for the court to really just make the Hamilton B. Ergler, the Hamburglar, pay for Postmates legal fees, as well as any other damages that they see fit. So again, just to recap all of this and tie it in a bow, you cannot sue Postmates for contracting coronavirus right now in 2020. Their food delivery service is considered essential, and their terms and agreements are airtight. Which brings me to my conclusion here, which is the ethical issue at hand. And y'all might have different schools of thought on this. That's fine. I just want to throw it out there as a discussion question. Are Postmates terms and agreements, as well as their skyrocketing profits during a pandemic, legally ethical in light of our current climate? Let's look to this graphic I put here, Principles of Ethics. I really liked this. I found it on Google Images. But autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, and justice. Now, in terms of autonomy and beneficence, old people right now, the elderly, really rely on delivery services. My grandparents right now are using Grubhub to get a lot of their food. And to me, when I just see these terms and agreements, when there is just so much at stake for people not to get sick, and the reason they're ordering in instead of going to the restaurant, I just really, ethically, if we can go back to principles of ethics, or one of our first courses here, it does not rub me the right way. If this is really a means to avoid the disease, I believe that by having a lack of liability, such a profound one too, just written so order at your own risk. These are the conflating issues I told you about before in my initial slide of the bottom line of a company versus the well-being of the people. And as far as non-malfeasance, if people are getting sick, especially the drivers, then that's malfeasant to me. And last we go to justice, and that's when you're just going to have to answer for yourself. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed. Now on to Nicole's presentation on employment law.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I will be presenting the employment law portion of our presentation. Employment law is a broad area of law that encompasses all the areas relating to the employer and employee relationship. A significant portion of employment laws were actually enacted as protective labor legislation, an example being minimum wage regulations as they protect the employee from being underpaid by the employer. Four major areas of employment law include employment discrimination, unemployment compensation, workers' compensation, and pensions. An employee is a party who is hired by an employer to perform work, whereas an independent contractor is a party hired to perform a specific service. An independent contractor is able to complete the task as they are beyond the control of the person who hired them. They're generally able to choose how they complete the task and when they complete the task, as long as it is completed before the predetermined deadline. When conducting a legal analysis of whether an individual is considered an independent contractor or an employee, the ABC rule is commonly utilized. The ABC rule consists of Section A being the worker is free from the control and direction of the hirer in connection with the performance of the work, both under contract and in fact. Section B, the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. In Section C, the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade or occupation of the same nature as the work performed for the hiring entity. Postmates Terms of Service. This is a section that kind of hints at the fact that Postmates is a technology company that created a platform which forms connections between consumers, merchants, and Postmates drivers. So therefore, Postmates drivers are actually independent contractors, not employees, because within the ABC rule, they satisfy all the sections. As you can see here with Section A, Postmates drivers are free from the control of Postmates when delivering food to people because they are able to choose when they want to work, how long they work, and specifically what delivery requests they do or do not accept. In Section B, Postmates drivers deliver food, while Postmates created and programmed a platform to create connections between individuals. And Section C, Postmates is a technology company that created a platform and Postmates drivers perform a delivery service. They are two separate entities and forms of business. Again, in the Postmates Terms of Service, Postmates clearly states that Postmates provides a technology platform that facilitates connections between consumers and merchants, and then with the Postmates drivers for the pickup and delivery of the food or merchandise, and that couriers or Postmates drivers are specifically independent contractors and not employees of Postmates. The following slides are an independent contractor agreement that I drafted and edited to kind of align more with the Postmates and Postmates driver connection. Postmates drivers, as you can see in the services to be provided, they deliver food or beverage to consumers. They are providing, in essence, a delivery service. In the payment section, I detailed the breakdown of how Postmates drivers are paid for the delivery, as well as Postmates drivers are required to provide their own vehicle for the delivery of the merchandise. This section details more about the status of Postmates drivers as independent contractors. Specifically, they are able to determine the means, the methods, and when they complete the deliveries using the Postmates platform. The next section shows that Postmates drivers should have, in essence, a valid driver's license because they need to be able to legally operate a motor vehicle. Additionally, Postmates drivers will not receive any form of benefits from Postmates because they're independent contractors. So, for example, they would not receive health insurance from Postmates, as well as Postmates is not responsible for paying unemployment compensation to the Postmates drivers because Postmates drivers are independent contractors. Next, in the workers' compensation section, for example, if a Postmates driver got into an accident during the course of a delivery, Postmates would not be held liable for paying any form of workers' compensation. They would not be held liable for paying for car repair or for paying for the driver's medical bills if they got into a car accident. Also, Postmates drivers are required to have valid and up-to-date auto insurance because they will be operating a motor vehicle to complete the deliveries using the Postmates platform. This slide depicts more of the conditions usually seen within an independent contractor agreement between the hire entity and the independent contractor. This slide shows that some form of confidentiality should be maintained between Postmates and the Postmates driver, as well as the Postmates driver with any knowledge they gain while completing deliveries using the Postmates platform. For example, this would be consumers' addresses that the Postmates drivers are delivering the food to. Again, this is another portion of the agreement that just further depicts certain portions of what should be detailed when entering an independent contractor contract where the independent contractor is completing a service for the client, or in essence, Postmates, and the signature lines. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. Hope you have a nice day.